This right back charge is definitely.
People deluded, I'm back again.
Come on, Ian. Come on. Showtime, people deluded. I'm back again. Now, there's been a lot of clamour to get George back on my platform, so I'm delighted to have him back to do exactly that. As usual, my guy, appreciative of you offering your thoughts and sharing your face. How you doing, my friend, man?
I'm great, man. Well, I'm okay. I think last night was a difficult pill to swallow, but I think we're good. I'm happy to discuss it. Hopefully, we get some therapy sessions so that we all feel a little bit better about what happened.
Let's jump straight back into it. Obviously, people don't see, but to the left, I've got all the things I really want to ask you. But you said it there, really and truly. Why was it a tough pill for you to swallow? Obviously, if people don't know, he's talking about Arsenal, Bayern Munich. We drew 2-2. You never know with YouTube, but go on, my friend.
Yeah, I think, look, there was a couple things because I want to start off by saying, let's talk about the penalty controversy last so that people can hear the issues with what we did first so that they don't sit there and say that you're just blaming that the opposition or the refereeing decisions are the reason. So first here, I want to talk about the midfield issues. I think that there was a big structural issue, in my opinion, in midfield, particularly with Jorginho as the deepest of deep-lying pivots. I remember doing on so many posts, I don't mind Jorginho starting, but let's do the Liverpool 2.0 game plan where he's a little bit higher up and we have Declan Rice in those areas to combat the 1v1 battles with Musiala and to combat the transition defense that we saw, because I don't think Arsenal this season have ever shown that much green grass. And it's for a reason. And it's because of a structural issue, in my opinion. And I just think we didn't win enough second balls, which is not something you can say of Arsenal. We are the absolute best at that in the world. It's
statistically as well, facts.
It's absolutely shown. So the fact that we didn't do it meant that we didn't do our biggest strength. And then ironically, one of Bayern's biggest weaknesses this season has been second balls. And Goretzka, for me, I felt had an extraordinarily good game. He hasn't had
even in the road to the first goal, like his late run as well. We didn't pick that up, man.
It was brilliant, and I thought in general there was a lot of people nervous. Saliba, for example, typically calm, composure. I felt like in the first 15, 20 minutes, I didn't see as composed play from him, and I felt even on the penalty he was trying to make up for that in a sense. And so there was a lot of people that I felt like just weren't composed. I mean, David Raya, we'll talk into the goal and now the breakdown of that. But, I think giving 2 goals on a silver platter to a team that you're dominating is not something that you can do at the top level, let alone in a quarterfinal of the Champions League. And fundamentally, a lot of the issues that I felt like, at least in midfield, where Declan Rice was outside of the block, not in central spaces, meant that we couldn't see his influence. There was one moment in the first half, I think I counted, he switched to Gabriel Martinelli. That's ridiculous, especially when you're talking about our wide outlets, right? And look, lastly, Bukayo Saka down that left-hand side, the first 20 minutes, we were torching Alphonso Davies and Bayern down that left-hand side, absolutely torching them. And a lot of it had to do with Martin Odegaard's ability to pull Lamer out of position.
This is why I like this guy on my platform, because what have I been telling you about Martin Odegaard? But go on, man, you're preaching, man. Let me not interrupt. Keep preaching, bro.
No, I thought like his positioning was brilliant. And I mean, I felt as though, he really worked that pivot apart. And, if we were able to really maneuver the ball into those areas a little bit more effectively, I just feel like we could have been a little bit more clinical in the chances that we got. A lot of people will point to the Ben White chance, which is a missed opportunity. But look, how many times does a fullback get that chance in a season? Maybe once, twice. So I can expect him not to be the most composed there. But ultimately, I think he was one of the more composed defenders on the night in general. I felt like amongst the back line, he was the one person that did his job. 1v1 against Gnabry, did brilliantly. And so I was left frustrated because I don't think Mikel set up the team to how we would play normally. Now, is that the players not listening to a game plan? Potentially. Is that because we weren't getting the balance right in midfield? I definitely think so. But on a whole, that's what I left frustrated with, that I felt like we could have done more with this tie, with no Bayern fans, because I almost feel we got the scoreline I expected at the Allianz at home. I'm sitting there thinking, I still think we can get a high scoreline at the Allianz, but it's tougher. I would have rather had the 2-2
Dynamics are
at the
different.
Allianz.
We're bang on the money, man. The dynamics are just completely different away in Germany. Now, obviously, again, the Premier League is a different beast to the Champions League, but how we've definitely not yesterday, but how we've generally defended, I can have some sort of confidence, maybe potentially blind optimism. And obviously, you know about confirmation bias, and maybe I'm guilty of that because a lot of what you've said, I've said in my reviews and stuff. And I think we've both seen the game in a similar outlet. I think hindsight's a wonderful thing. And I think maybe potentially Mikel Arteta, it's a double-edged sword, because if you change things, same result happens. Me and you are potentially sitting here and saying, why did you do that? I do think in another way, we played a dangerous game, as you said. I would have loved to have seen Declan Rice in the 6, Jorginho kind of the further forward, just because Rice has got better legs in that regards, and was far too open. Again, we know a byproduct of our pressing high and a high line and things. Me and you know that. Where you get an advantage somewhere, you get a disadvantage in that there's spaces to kind of counterattack. And I think Bayern was street smart in that regards. And I think getting caught in 1v1 situations, big up Benjamin White, who I would have faulted him for the first goal. Maybe could have got tighter to Gnabry, but I think that didn't play into our hands. I do think Bayern was street smart. I do think it was positive in that I think we started the game well, ended the game well. In between, there's a lot to be said. I think there's a lot of naiveties. And, the key thing you said there, and I want to kind of go back over it, is I said in the preview of this game, I think even we touched on it vaguely the last time you was here. For me, as much as it's about tactics and formations and individual battles and all of that stuff, and, Bayern versus Arsenal, Arteta versus Tuchel, there's different matches up and stuff like that. But I think it comes down to moments, and I also think it comes down to psychological factors. Now, Bayern's players, whatever you say about them, the vast majority of those players have been around the block. We're kind of new here. And I felt yesterday, I've obviously seen our team make mistakes, but I felt yesterday it was psychological because, these lot have defended greatly for the vast majority of the season. Saliba finally looked his age. And if I'm honest, at the Emirates against Porto, I also felt a bit different, but Saliba showed them kind of issues. Gabriel and David Raya, for me, it's like, if you've got your brothers and sisters and your family all at your house and someone breaks a plate, your grandma, everybody's getting slaps. Nobody's getting asked who did what and whatever. Everyone's getting in trouble. So I do think Kiwior could have done better. I do think Raya could have done better with the sweeper keeper stuff. Maybe, but Gabriel could have potentially allowed him to just leave it. But I think it's just a culmination of errors. And it goes back to what you said, our midfield was open. But for you, how much of a psychological issues were there in the game? Or how much do you think that phases us? Because I think Havertz, Odegaard, to be honest, Gabriel Jesus, Trossard, and Zinchenko, they're kind of absolved from that. But the vast majority of the team kind of felt victims. But where would you be at with that?
I'm caught between two minds because you can't say that psychologically there was no impact because we've done things that we haven't done all season. So I think there's a component, but I don't know. I then look at Bukayo Saka, for example, who is our most potent attacker and has supposedly no experience in the league. And, he's sitting there buying a yellow off Alphonso Davies in the first, 8 minutes? So, I mean, he sat out there and he did his job. I think fundamentally there are times that we look towards narrative, and I do it too, in terms of trying to see. I personally have always felt that you've got to play the game in front of you. And I'm a big fan about maintaining your fundamentals. And things can go wrong, but I just felt like our response to things going wrong wasn't quick enough for a large majority of the match. And Kiwior is something that we should probably get onto because I know personally for me, I was a Partey and Tomiyasu combo for this game.
You're not alone. You're not alone. Like Arteta knows more than us, but as an ignorant fan, I was with you with that because I know if you put a gun to my head and we're playing Bayern Munich, I know fitness is a thing, but them two are in there. But we'll get on to Kiwior, man. Let me write that down. Go on, my friend.
Yeah, and so So look, I definitely think psychologically there was an issue because the first goal for me is pure psychology. David Raya has been coming out and being the most proactive keeper by a long shot in the Premier League. Also,
doesn't he sleep?
Yeah, and so I just think as a goalkeeper, by the way, I put more blame on David Raya because Gabriel is running back to goal being worried about Harry Kane. Okay, he's the goalkeeper that's coming out and he sees the pitch.
With the eyes and ears.
Yeah, mate, he's got to yell with authority. I'm sorry, if you've played football at any level, you're relying at your goalkeeper to tell you what to do, leave it, drop it, take it to touch. There's so many different
options. To hear him shout, Rayas or something, yeah.
Something. And then you know what? And the one thing I will say as as a center back, what you're taught is if you don't hear a shout, clear to touch and regroup.
Deal with it. Deal with it first.
And no one did. And so that's why it's like, I'm not comfortable saying it's Raya's fault. It's Gabriel's fault. It's Kiwior, who I haven't even got onto right now.
That does the Gabriel for me, man, because Gabriel's mopped up. Like what you said, to echo your point, he swept up well. You know, when in doubt, deal with it and then shout later. He's dealt with it. He looked like, watching the replay, you've seen, it's like he's like, oh, Raya, what's going on there? He's dealt with it. My issue with Gabriel is you've tried that pass, really, but go on.
Yeah, and so look, I'm thinking at the end of the day, there's no Bayern Munich there. Like, there's no players there. So fundamentally, even if I went for a throw-in, that throw-in will kill the transition, right? Like, even if you're totally panicked, and there's no issue with that. At least when you've got yourself there, you've got multiple people back. The pass is poor, but then Kiwior, is he flat-footed? Why is he leaving a lazy leg out? You know, he should be doing a bit better. And then the pass. By the way, I have to say, the pass pace on both of those were perfect. I don't think we were expecting that clinical edge. It was clinical. It was brilliant from Bayern Munich's perspective. But still, mate, I think we could have done better in the tackle. And I'm looking at Jorginho running back to goal, pointing, and then doing a slide tackle. And then I'm like, okay, you know, Saliba, can you meet? He misses his slide tackle as well. And then you're sitting there saying, okay, is that player brilliance, or is that you maybe not being 100%?
Or is it both?
Sound? Yeah, is it both? And so I'm frustrated. That's a goal that I look at and I say, it's playground stuff. And I think we know that. You don't even have to be elite to concede that goal. I think Burnley look at that goal and say that's poor, you know? So it's one of those that I think it shouldn't derail you, I guess is my point. It's a very poor moment against the run of play.
Shake it off.
But shake it off and start attacking Alphonso Davies on the yellow card again, mate. Like, you were torching him for 20 minutes. Why did we have to stop? And I think I saw one statistic, like, we'll get into, it's maybe jumping, but I mean, after the 75th minute, but mate, after the 75th minute, we didn't even have a shot on target, despite having the Jay-Z. After the equalizer, we didn't have a shot on target, which, okay, you don't want to lose, but I mean, at some point you got to, I think the patterns were predictable. It was predictable in a lot of ways. What was unpredictable was the manner in which we defended. I think nobody going in would have predicted that. At the very least, we could have said, okay, Champions League nerves. Do we have the experience? Do we have the composure? Do we have the in-possession quality and the killers to score? Maybe not, hand on heart. Maybe we don't. But defensively, there are no questions about this Arsenal team. Yesterday, there were plenty.
And that's the thing for me. It's like, obviously, the Prem, we haven't won a Premier League, but I think in the last 2 years, the players have learned very quickly. We're kind of settled in and kind of know what to expect in the league. As we saw with City's teething issues, going from a team that gets to the latter stages of the champs, but winning it, there's teething issues. And I think a lot of it comes with experience. A lot of it comes with street smartness and asking yourselves the right questions. I do think it was nerves. If it was just like, if we won 2-1 and that mistake happens, fair enough. As much as I'm disappointed about the first goal, I'm absolutely livid about the second, or better yet, the build up to the second, because, you know, Neuer's done some nonsense with a kick up, and I think Kimmich and De Ligt have done very well. I'm not going to get onto Kiwior for getting turned by Sane, because it happens, but it's another one where you're not really impressive there, and it's kind of like our pressing hasn't worked. They've got out, and then kind of what you said, it's gone from what Jorginho, Gabriel, Saliba's kind of had a swipe at in. Obviously, he's brought the man down. For me, that was just a culmination of errors, and that summed us up defensively. Like yesterday, for me, it felt like Arsenal of old, kind of like the early Emirates era, in that purely in the final third, I felt very comfortable. You know, as you said, Saka was getting some joy against Davies. I think Havertz was one of our better performers. Martinelli, fair enough, he had a shot, didn't really get too much change out of Kimmich, but when you factor in Odegaard in the pockets, I was okay. The middle third, absolutely nervous. Defensively, appalling. And in the same way I praise my centre-half pairing and everybody, it just wasn't good enough, because you lot have been, you know, that's been a foundation of us, really and truly. So there was a lot of unnecessary issues, and I think as much as, you know, Arteta has to take some blame, I think sometimes in life, self-learning is the best. And I think the players are still learning whether to stick or twist, when to go for it, when to box smart. A lot of the things we're seeing in the Premier League. What did you make of Kiwior? Because you're like me in that, you know, we don't advocate scapegoating and things. And I will say, away from the fans that are just asking normal questions, you can't go from saying Kiwior is the best left back in their minds in the world, and in our team, he has a shaky game, he's hooked in 45 minutes, now he's terrible, this guy should have started that guy. But for me, I am nervous with Kiwior. I like his form. I think he's shown he can be a good option, but and he's actually done well in big games. But I'm yet to be quote unquote impressed with your defensive aspects. I'm yet to be convinced with you defending in wide areas, which whether he's going to be a centre half or a left back, he's going to have to do that. But what did you make of Kiwior?
I mean, it was one of his more poor games, let's call it, in his run. And I think he's been brilliant up until this point. But he has this one weakness, mate, and he doesn't do well with tricky wingers. And his defensive positioning out wide, he isn't square to his marker. He is a little bit stiff in how he approaches
Flat-footed, as you said earlier.
Yeah, very flat-footed. And I think when you're facing up against Sane, who, by the way, is not a scrub in terms of the winger prospects out in the world. I mean, you're sitting there playing against the quote-unquote top echelon of wingers. And so that, for me, is where the issue became. I think Kiwior is best when he's able to do a lot of his defending on the inside. When he's defending centrally, he looks strong, composed, in command, and in control. When he's out on the wings, it looks really stiff. His agility in terms of his turning is really poor. It's awkward, but also he doesn't look comfortable himself. His decision-making about when to engage and when not to engage has a level of indecisiveness that he doesn't have in central areas. So I think defending wide is not something that he's strong at. Defending centrally is. And that's actually why in preseason, do you remember when we had that one moment that we played with the idea of Gabriel defending wide out of possession and Kiwior in possession playing as the center back, and then they swapped roles in and out of possession? I thought that would have been a much better idea against this Bayern Munich squad if he's playing. But again, I can't hide. I think Tomiyasu was the right call because we didn't receive anything from him in possession. I saw no floated balls over the top to Martinelli. I didn't see him overlap near enough to go and support Martinelli to push him inside, which is one of the reasons you actually would put a Kiwior in. Like the whole idea of a Kiwior, at least in my mind, would have been, okay, that's because in possession, you at least want something in terms of his ability to push Martinelli inside. We didn't get that.
And you've got the confidence that he's solid defensively to say, you know what, you lot gambled to aid your point. But we never saw that.
Of course. And so you ideally have that in possession positive, but also out of possession, he's a center back. He can deal with the long ball floated over the top. That's the reason that you would hopefully put him in. But we didn't really get any of that. And so it was a poor night. I don't think there's too much more analysis that goes into how to fix Kiwior, because I don't think there's a fixing there. It was just a poor matchup. And I just don't think it was a matchup that I, again, agree with Mikel. And it's not often I do this, but I do believe that Tomiyasu was a better decision 1v1. And at the very least, if he wasn't fit enough, Zinchenko has similar worries 1v1 out wide, but at least I would get more in possession. So, I mean, I'm not losing the defensive. I think we still would have been burnt, quote unquote, with Sane, but at least I'm getting something in possession, a little bit more of a positive. Now, the one thing I will say is I think that when Zinchenko did come in, I don't think he made mistakes, but I don't think he helped the game state. We were rushed. And I think a lot of people...
You don't think Zinchenko had a positive impact? I think that's harsh, man.
No, I think he had a positive impact, but I don't think he necessarily helped the game state. Like, I think between...
I mean, I was scared when he came off the bench for reasons you said, obviously. I was like, oh, Arteta, oh, Kiwior looks shaky defensively. It's feeling like a bit even. Now you're bringing on Zini. I thought Tomiyasu would have come on, which I guess raises, like, how fit is Tomiyasu? Again, maybe it's a tactical decision. Maybe he's just got confidence in other players. But I did expect Tomiyasu to start today. But yeah, man, continue what you're saying, bro.
Yeah, no, just because here. So, for example, I think from the 30th minute, wouldn't you say, until I'd say, I don't know, maybe the 65th minute, there was a period of Bayern dominance in the transition. And I think just before that period,
fear on the transition for me as an Arsenal fan, doing a watch along. Honestly, I probably didn't, but I might have looked composed on YouTube. I was genuinely scared. Like, that was a game for a really long time with Arsenal that I've been scared. And it goes back to what me and you said on the platform, what I said when you was here last time, in the sense of, when I say this, and again, I'm not saying this to say Arsenal are the biggest and bad team in the world. I just feel when we've had disappointing results or disappointing performances or not got results, it's not necessarily been because the other team's been amazing. We've either shot ourselves in the foot. I kind of want to circle back then, yeah, before I forget this point on Kiwior. Mm-hmm. Do you think fans, and again, Kiwior's done well, and I'm just being devil's advocate here, but do you think fans overrated it? And I only say that because when he came into the team, and take nothing away from him against Porto, not that he was necessarily tested, I think he did okay against City. You know, I know Bernardo got at him. I know he did well against Liverpool. but I don't think he's really been tested defensively since he's come into this team. And that's nothing to do with him. That's testament to the team. And like I said, he's done well. But I just don't think the case study has been big enough for people to portray him as something he's not at this moment in time, because I think he's done well. But when I ask what are the qualities Kiwior has displayed for this Arsenal team, nobody can tell me in vague terms. And I'm not saying that people to say he's not a good player. I heard he's quick, as you know, and what you've said. It doesn't matter how fast or how switched on, how quick you are if you're not switched on defensively, if you're caught flat-footed. People say he's got great passing. I didn't really see that in comparison to some of his teammates. But yeah, what would be your thoughts?
I don't think he's shown the qualities that I think we're supposed to ask for Kiwior in this team so far. You know, I think some of his best work has actually ironically been at right center back for this Arsenal team. And we know that's not something that he wants to do long term, but his best individual performances have come at that point. But they came, by the way, in a role that he was dictating possession and that we could actually see some of the passing ranges that we've been quoting. So I think for me, Kiwior is a tough one, because I would even throw it back to you, mate. Like, do you ever think that Kiwior was bought for left back? Do you ever think that he was bought to be a left back?
No.
Or was he bought to be more of a Laporte at City?
And that's the thing. And then I guess in vague terms, I guess you was kind of brought to be a left back because Laporte is kind of filled in them roles. I personally think you were just brought in to be a defensive body. Now, obviously, I wasn't watching Spezia on a regular basis, but a big thing Arsenal fans used to say is, oh, he's played centre mid. Obviously, you know, he's probably more at home at centre half. He's played left back. So for me, there's a lot of transferable skills. You're clearly smart because you retain information and you're able to play in a lot of roles. And I could see vaguely how you tie into what we're doing, but at the same time, at best, all I ask for Kiwior is kind of what he's doing to a degree. When you play, maybe not so much yesterday, just be consistent and be competent and put pressure on spots. If you're not going to take Gabriel's spot or anyone at left back, just make sure they know my performance can't drop off, really. And I would say the main thing with Kiwior, and I think he's getting it in him, I would say it's mentality. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I actually think that's helped his uptake in performance. I think in the last few games, this is where Kiwior's actually sat there and thought, I'm an Arsenal footballer, if you're asking me. And I'll be interested to see what happens with Kiwior. I think his form has swayed it, rightly so. But I thought he might be one that, I wouldn't say through the door, but he's struggled for first team football. He might not be in the 11 when everyone's fit. And rumours are not actual confirmations to buy players. But when you hear 20, 30, 40 odd million and a lot of interest from Italy, maybe the club will say, you know what, maybe we could get someone else, man. I don't know.
I just think that I think he's an alternative to Gabriel in the sense that he's definitely more technical than Gabriel, but he's not an alternative in the defensive aspect of Gabriel. Like, Gabriel's a warrior. He's the bite. He's a gladiator to the partnership.
Gladiator, yeah.
And, you know, that's not Kiwior. Kiwior is the Saliba in theory. So
even that, I think you're even being a bit kind to him, man. I think he's a bit timid, man. I think he's a bit, as you know, with defenders, yeah, like obviously, if you was to go on YouTube, it's slide tackles, it's last ditch challenges, it's all of that stuff that will be in highlights. And I know everyone likes to see that stuff, but for me, it's about being proactively reactive. You've got to read situations before they've happened, and you've almost got to not see them. A bit like what, not yesterday, but what Saliba does, but what Van Dijk does. And Kiwior doesn't get that. And at the same time, I find myself thinking, while I don't think you're an organic left back, and Arteta at times has tailored that role for you, as much as I don't think you're that, and you're kind of crippled to play in a position you're not, at what point do I go, well, whether I believe he's that or not, or maybe him the same, end of the day, that's where you're playing. That's where you're getting minutes. And being devil's advocate, and I'll throw it to you, I know he's not a left back and he's uncomfortable in wide areas, but whether you play fullback or at centre half, surely there's certain transferables or consistencies you should see in a quote unquote defender. And I don't see them consistently.
For me, it's the strengths. I do think that in different areas, you see the pitch differently, for sure. And you're going to have different struggles, right? But let's say your strength is long passing. Let's actually not talk in the ether, because Kiwior is a brilliant long switcher of the ball. We've seen it in international.
He's got qualities. You can see why he's here.
Yeah, he's done it. But how many times can you count did he switch it from left back out to Saka?
How many times did he carry the ball forward?
So, and he's got the clipped ball into Martinelli. Like, we've seen it in the run-in. He's got that technical ability. So why doesn't he do it? And that's when I question. So I question players when I look at their strengths and I say that you don't do stuff that I normally see you do. And I think that it's a weakness in terms of his defending out wide, but I think it's always been a weakness. Whenever I've watched Kiwior, whenever I scouted him, I say, ooh, we got to tweak his positioning. We're going to have to work on that. So I expect that to be an issue. But what I don't expect, for example, is you not to overlap for Martinelli. I don't expect for you not to have some clipped balls inside. I don't expect for you not to attempt any long switches out to the right flank to hit Saka on the overlap after, by the way, Alphonso Davies is on the yellow card and who bombs on in the spaces behind there. Like, you have the technical quality to do it, and those are things that I haven't seen. So that's what I critique Kiwior for. Do I think he's there for the long term? I don't know. I think he's good enough to be Arsenal quality as a bench player, but I've never felt that he's a starting potential.
Same. It's down to him if you what reality he wants, really. It's just down to him, really, because he's taking advantage of the injuries. And I always say, you know, that's how you get your opportunities. That's how things happen, essentially. But at the end of the day, if everybody's fit, is he in the strongest 11? I don't know. So just keep taking your chances. And that's the thing. It's like, obviously, he's playing more as a traditional, quote unquote, left back. But I still don't see the caveat of him being able to do that, because as you're kind of alluding to, whether it's the passes, whether it's the overlaps, whether it's just the quality on the ball, I'm not really seeing it. And in build-up play, it does harm us. But I don't want this to sound like a Kiwior hate campaign, people. Everybody's got strengths. Everyone's got weaknesses. I and George would have just preferred Tomiyasu, really, because he's stronger 1v1. He's more dominant in the air. He's more of a nuisance. He's a Japanese Swiss Army life. Like, he would know when to get tight to Sane, when to drop off. And again, I'm not killing Kiwior for getting turned by Sane. That happens. You can't shut him up. As a defender, your job is to win, win the war. You'll lose battles, him taking you down the flank, cutting inside, etc. And to be fair to Kiwior, collectively, we were shambolic in the middle and defensive third, going back to what George said at the start. So there is a bit of an excuse. I'll cut him in that regards, man, if I'm honest. But just like you said, I don't know if he's going to develop beyond being a bench player, and it's just down to him to prove it, man.
For sure. And that's okay, by the way. Like, we don't have to buy. It's okay, And I don't know, if he comes in, he's been able to do a job, and then we move him on for what, 25 million pounds? He's done his job.
Keep it moving, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't worry. I sit there and I say, okay, this was a bad moment. It doesn't describe what he's been doing for the last 7 or 8 games. I think on the whole, he's been great the last 7 or 8 games. This was a bad moment. He had a bad moment against Bernardo Silva. He has bad moments against diminutive wingers out wide, defending wide. We know it. So don't put him in those positions. When you face up against somebody like that, don't do that. I'm sitting there and I'm looking at, for example, Aston Villa, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, you've got Leon Bailey. Should we start to look at introducing Tomiyasu to get minutes in preparation for a win at Bayern?
Do you think Zinni's played his way into that team?
Zinni, look, I think against the team, I wouldn't mind seeing Zinchenko in terms of, I think it's going to be a low block mate. Like, they're not with Douglas Luiz. They don't have Kamara in the middle of the park. So, I mean, sure, I think there's an opportunity to sit there and say Zinchenko deserves a start, at least, to get minutes in there. I think, look, the one thing with Zinchenko, I thought yesterday, at least, I was kind of alluding to it. I felt like from the 35th to the 65th minute, Arsenal were rushing their decisions in the middle of the park far too often. You could even see a moment in the second half where not only Mikel was getting frustrated, but Declan Rice tells the crowd to calm down.
Yeah.
The entire team.
I was just about to do that.
Yeah, and I think that the entire team was rushing things. And the one thing that I think was Zinchenko is that he took too many touches when he came on, but he helped us in our central progression. So I'm sitting there and I'm caught between two minds where I don't think he helped the game state in that sense, but he himself helped in our progression. And he did a lot more than Kiwior. He did a lot better than Kiwior. And so in that sense, I think he should get minutes. I'm just more in the camp of, I think Tommy needs to be 100% fit. I'm looking at Tommy to start for the Allianz, and I go, is that done with 20 minutes on the field? I don't know. I think I need a start. I need a 60-minute play from him, and then we can switch it with Zinchenko, or vice versa. Zinchenko starts it, and then Tommy ends it. I think they need to share the minutes at this point. I definitely would take Kiwior out of the limelight, and I would for the next 2 games, personally.
Yeah, I think I'm with you, man. Don't get twisted. If Kiwior plays, he'll have my support, and I hope he does the best because it's better for Arsenal. But with Aston Villa and everything on the line where the Premier League's concerned, and obviously Bayern Munich away, I'd want my strongest players in whatever roles are demanded. And, Tomiyasu has made mistakes. He's had bad games, but I just feel a lot more confident in him. He looks, and I always say it, when Tomiyasu got his first injury this season, I was very disappointed beyond the obvious because, he looked a lot more confident in the final third. Like I've always said, he's our most conservative defender, but he looked a lot more comfortable inverting. And I just think there's a better relationship now. I think Martinelli, you know, was ineffective, and he's got several question marks he has to answer off his own back. But there has to be a correlation between obviously Granit Xhaka going and us still having teething issues in that left 8, and we've seen a lot of left backs play, and I do think that's harmed Martinelli. That being said, though, what did you make of Martinelli yesterday, and what have you made of him in general? Because a lot of people were clamoring for him to start, really, and I wanted Martinelli to start, but I also told people don't discount Gabriel Jesus. Now, Gabriel Jesus could have started, played exactly like Martinelli. Martinelli comes off the bench and looks like a hero like Jesus. That's what football's about, and we're having another conversation. But what did you make of Martinelli?
I think that he was left isolated. I think he was feeding off scraps, and I think the whole left-hand side didn't function properly. And, you know, some of that is on Martinelli's decision-making, but some of that is on the team and us supporting him. I think if you actually were to look at touch maps, and look, some of this is by design, and people are going to be screaming into their mics, but we need Martinelli to be in space as a touchline winger. But I go, mate, I'm telling you right now, Granit Xhaka wasn't doing that last season. He was supporting him with runs, and he was on the overlap, creating space. We had, by the way, Jesus overlapping left as well, and there was
overloads
space
on both sides.
Yeah, so he was getting space created for him, and he had support. If you look at the heat and the touch maps, I think everybody's kind of grouped on the right, and you've got multitude of support. And then Martinelli, the nearest person, is Declan Rice that's sitting in the pivot, and there's a distinct space. And mate, we just isolate Martinelli the most in Europe. I mean, I don't even think it's just an Arsenal thing. You start to compare it amongst the Premier League and in Europe. I mean, it's the same thing. And so I'm frustrated because I think that he's been relegated to a defensive retaining winger role, a Jack Grealish as such, somebody
just
that
holds his width, defends. If you can get on the ball and do something, that's a bonus. And I as you said, you know, I think for me, anyways, I think it's a bit of a byproduct because what we have or haven't done with that left 8, and I feel on the left hand side there hasn't been that afforded continuity. Like, you know, like Trossard's done well, he's come in. Martinelli's obviously had good games. It's happened only on a couple of occasions, but you've had Jesus. We've had a whole lot of different pivots in midfield. You know, the only two consistencies are obviously Odegaard further forward and Declan Rice, and there's been a lot of injuries at left back. You know, again, I don't think we're talking about Kiwior or Martinelli in the light we're talking about if Timber was fit, but that's all ifs and buts. That's not absolute, so we can't really waffle about that. And I would like to go back to last season in that was the first time for a while last year, because, you know, us Arsenal fans, we've got this running joke that we either look very good down the right or like in recent years, or when even Kolasinac, when we look like we'd make something happen down the left. Last year, we was a bit more even. This year, I don't quite think it is there, and I do think Martinelli suffers. Do you think Martin Odegaard has dispelled that myth to football fans that he doesn't turn up in big games? Because he's been putting in performances for a while, but I think that was the first one people would look at and say, great. People have question marked if he should be captain generally throughout his time. For me, that's a captain's performance. What's your thoughts?
I just think that the only criticism I personally have had is, can he do it against physical teams? And, you know, I think that's one of the only things. Comment. And it's like, I'm looking at, for example, Everton away. I'm looking at Crystal Palace when he was on the left against Gallagher. Like, I'm looking at those types of games. But in terms of big games, no, I think he's taken a huge step up. He's been incredible. And I think he's been elite, I'd say, from the end of November after getting over that hip injury. And even that even that role change, by the way, like, he was really poor as a second striker. And there was a part in the first 2 months of the season that we had him doing a role that didn't suit him.
Facts.
And so doing that is poor. But then after that, he's been utterly elite. Like, I think Martin Odegaard's been one of the best players for Arsenal since November till now. And it's been consistent. Look, if you give the guy middle third responsibility, he's going to shine. He's one of the best players in the world at that. He's an all-phase midfielder. You got to stop pigeonholing him as a pivot, deep-lying playmaker. Stop pigeonholing him as a 10. He does it all. He is, to a lesser extent, and I don't want to do this because I love him, but Modric for me is the prime all-phase midfielder when I look at what I like. And he has a bit of that. He has ability to control the tempo of the match, but he's a lot more defensive and he's a lot more switched on. His engine is incredible. No one talks about his engine. I feel he can run more than I've seen for a lot of people. He gives me a very Frank Lampard vibes in terms of the way that he can crash the box and the stamina that he takes in terms of all of the runs that he's able to do.
So close to being a complete midfielder, man.
He's so close. He's very close to it. And I just think that, you know, if he can tidy up a couple of decision-making, and I always say this and people think it's a criticism, but I want his pass accuracy to go down. Be more brave in terms of the through balls you attempt because you have the quality to do it. And I think if he starts to do those things more effectively, you're going to start to see a player reach a different level than just world class. And I think he has that potential. The one thing I'll say with Martin and Odegaard is I feel that each season he's taken a next step in terms of he's been able to really rise to the occasion.
Facts.
I think, I look at him in terms of actually being a huge leader, not just out of possession, but I think in terms of his in possession work, in terms of pulling out Lamer in this match, I thought it was brilliant. So for me, I've got zero complaints. I mean, I think he was man of the match for me in terms of an Arsenal sense. Maybe just competing with Bukayo, because I think Bukayo personally had such a brilliant night.
I can't lie to you, bro. Big up Saka, but it's Odegaard, man. Odegaard is up there from minute zero. Saka there was times for me he went kind of quiet. Again, I'm not asking for someone to be amazing for 90 minutes. And Saka is a contender. Like literally, as we said earlier, it's a weird one because it'd really just be the attackers. Obviously, if you want to take the short end of it, Trossard, take nothing away from it, come off the bench and made the difference. Saka, quality. We asked him to step up in games. He's another one that they say in big games. And going back to the Porto game, like with Saliba, there's been times I've looked at Saka and he's finally looked his age, or someone that hasn't been exposed to that. For me, I echo everything you said with Martin Odegaard. His intelligence, his football IQ, his ball retention, adding different layers. Again, I think in England, because he doesn't fit the captain's narrative, he's not, he's probably one of the best shirt sellers for the young ladies out there. They've all probably got posted on their wall about him. He doesn't fit that profile of being an ugly captain that's just going to fly into tackles and things. Obviously, he's not the most physical of men in the sense of he's not going to barge you off the ball, but I even think he's got stronger. And I think when we talk about world-class potential, like you said, beyond that, we tend to focus that conversation internally at Arsenal at the moment around Declan Rice, around Saliba, around Bukayo Saka. And I really think people sleep on Martin Odegaard, what he is, what he's become so far in an Arsenal shirt, and most importantly, where he could go. As Mikel Arteta said, he just needs to keep doing what he's doing. And the world's his oyster, man. £30 million. Ridiculous.
It's up there with one of the better deals that Arsenal have done in their history, if you actually think about price to quality. And look, I think in general, what midfielder gives you the level of out of possession work, stamina, and work in the press that he does, along with what would you say? Does he not guarantee you 15 goals a season?
Yeah, minimum? If you could get him in those positions. I actually feel he hasn't been in as many goal scoring positions this season, but I think it's a bit of give and take. As you've seen, his role slightly demanded him to be a bit more kind of dropping deep kind of thing. So naturally there's going to be that. And where you look at Odegaard, I always fight with like an angel and a devil on my shoulder, because I feel if you rob him of him in the final third, obviously we're going to miss that. But I think he gives you greater impetus in the middle third, and generally that makes us a lot better. But for that to work, you need someone that probably even half the potential or quality of Odegaard for that to work. I think Odegaard, if there was a footballer that typifies Mikel Arteta's journey at Arsenal Football Club and the DNA and all that stuff in Arteta's image, it's Mr. Wondergaard. And I must admit, when he was given the captain's ban, I still said a lot of these things, but I didn't quite understand that. Now I get it. So, bro, the man can play for City. Like, people looked at me crazy on YouTube when I said that. I said, if there's two players that could play for Manchester City, it'd be two on the right-hand side in Bukayo Saka and Odegaard. And obviously, of recent, there's probably some others that could be thrown into that.
The whole right-hand side, Pep would love.
yeah. Better Foden. I know that much. It's a joke, people. Don't cry.
No, it's look, he's brilliant. And like, I mean, I say the 15 goal mark just because he did it last season. He's approaching those numbers this season. It's becoming a consistent part to his game, not that he needs to do it, but he is. And I think like when you start to look at it again, I had mentioned Mudryk, I mentioned Barella. Those type of all phase eights that contribute in every single facet is something that you're looking for. Something, by the way, little shout out, Ethan Nwaneri, I think has the potential to do himself. Like we have that successor. Yeah.
That would be him long term, 100%. And that's it's funny you said Ethan, because who's tutoring him? Martin Odegaard, allegedly.
And it's brilliant because we've got an example of a player, by the way, that broke through at 16. That was a wonder kid at Madrid. And so you've got the perfect it's all there. It's part of the plan. And I think it's brilliant. Again, the only thing that I would do, and it's constructive criticism, in my opinion, is I think that there are times that I think he can learn when to release the ball and when to be recycle. I think there are just a couple times he's naturally recycle first. And then I think I just want him to be more penetrative. Like I looked at his Sociedad. Yeah, like do you not remember his Sociedad days, the amount of through balls that he attempted, and it was just spamming through for Isaac? And I just thought, I want to see more. Like I know you can do it. I know you have more responsibility in this team, but I'd love to see that freedom. And I think he has the most freedom in the team to move where he wants.
Rightly so. With
So
the
use
responsibility, because he's intelligent enough to do it. I would also say if there was one criticism I have for Odegaard is, and it's not really anything to do with him, sometimes you need to learn your teammates in it, as Thierry Henry once said. And I think sometimes when he's doing that high IQ stuff, that real, like there's an eye of a needle of a pass, and then there's a real needle of an eye of a pass. Sometimes I think he's operating at levels that I love to see, but he's operating up here. His teammates are down there. They can't necessarily see what's going on. Like, I want to be wary of where I look at, where I go with this Odegaard comment. But the way I look at you, and there's completely different roles. If I just different players, if I just band it under eloquence, intelligence, and everything we want to see at Arsenal, I see no reason why he can't be long-term mentioned in that same vein as what Mesut Ozil was in terms of a footballer, what Santi Cazorla's done in terms of a footballer, and what Cesc Fabregas. He's the closest thing in terms of what I want to see as an Arsenal player or Arsenal midfielder to these lot. I mean, that's someone I've backed from the jump. I've been wrong about so many players, but I genuinely believe there's no way you couldn't have seen what Odegaard was doing, even in the early days, when it wasn't rosy, and seeing that there's light at the end of the tunnel. But that's just me, man.
I think Santi's the best example. Like, he's not two-footed like Santi.
That's another thing. I mean, you know how left footers are, man.
But of course, and he has a little bit of angle bias in that sense, like you could say is a weakness as well, you know. And I think that, you know, I've said this comment, by the way. I've been a proponent of moving him to the left for months. And it has nothing to do with taking away his influence. It has everything to do with pairing him with a winger that likes to run. And I think that's important when you match pairings and chemistry together. Saka can run, he can, but he's a ball to feet person, naturally. He wants the ball, he wants to feel the ball. What does Martin Odegaard want to do? He wants to do the same thing. So I think ultimately, pair that with somebody like Martinelli who likes to run off the ball and watch that explosion.
And like you said about body positionings as well, on the left-hand side, obviously is more natural there, to echo your point.
For sure. So I mean, look, there's things, but yeah, he's been brilliant. And you know, I have a look at some other people in the team, and I think the story of the match in general, I think, has been one where experience faltered for people that we thought were brilliant in terms of prospects. And I think we had to rely a little bit on the experience players. In terms of Martin Odegaard, I thought did brilliantly. Bukayo Saka, who again, I think has had tons of experience, played really well in the match. Ben White, again, I thought with a strong performance against Serge Gnabry.
Which is not easy.
Yeah, it's not easy at all. And I think that he gets criticism for his 1v1 defending himself, which I think is a little bit over-exaggerated. I think legitimately it's Marcus Rashford that just gives him a torrid time, and he's one of those players that just does it for him. But other than that, Ben is top-notch when he's fit.
He's locked up Doku as well, which I know Doku isn't Gnabry, but like, yeah,
he's one of the best outlets in the league. Doku.
Exactly. And even Gabriel, our centre-half, Gabriel, now I can be a football fan, but Gabriel's described Doku as the most skillful player in the Prem. So if these pro ballers are saying it, there must be something to it.
Well, but I think, you know what people do? They look at the goal and assist and they go, has he been as effective? How can you sit there and say he's the most effective in the league? Yeah, that's what they do. But I think genuinely speaking, he's the one that creates the most doubt because he's probably one of the most explosive players in the league, going inside and outside, right? So I think that's what they worry about as professional footballers. And that's what they mean. But yeah, mate, like I think there was a lot of that's why I'm frustrated, though, just to get it back on track a bit. I think there was so much stuff in this match that I feel that we could have done a little bit better. I think there was so many things that I feel like this team has shown throughout the season that we didn't show necessarily against Bayern. And I'm left frustrated because I felt like that was a team that we could have gone and we played with our food a bit. And that's not something I'm comfortable doing in a Champions League when, you know, I don't think that we've been there very long. And I do call it playing with our food because we've given away, you know, multiple goals that I think that we don't normally give away. And I think we could have put the pressure on earlier. The one thing that we haven't talked about, by the way, I think is Jesus. I think he deserves a little bit.
Getting onto that, but take it away, man. The chemistry here is amazing. Go on, take it away with Gabriel Jesus. For me, he's a player a lot of people have had something to say, man.
Yeah, I don't know, mate. Like, I just think like somebody with a record that he has had in this competition, he should have been having more minutes. And he did the press conference. When's the last time a player that does the press conference doesn't start? I don't know.
I mean, he didn't get minutes on his birthday, so Arteta's shown that we never know what he's thinking, did it? Really and truly. Like, even with the build-up of the games until we played Bayern Munich around Tomiyasu and Partey, we didn't see them start. So we never know what our gaffer's thinking, really, man.
No, and look, I mean, I just think he's a brilliant player, mate. And I think it was the best he's looked since injury as well. Like, I think he's been taking steps, by the way, the last couple of weeks. And, I think he's been getting influence. I've been seeing that turn, the agility, the threat that he carries between the lines. There was a moment in that Bayern Munich match that I just felt like that we had nothing between the lines. Nothing was sticking until we got Trossard and Jesus. Trossard, you should probably pair with Jesus in terms of the commentary, because I think they work brilliantly together in the same way that I
Quality
think
super sub
Trossard.
yesterday.
Yeah, mate. Like, and by the way, Trossard has the most goals as a sub in the top 5 leagues.
Super sub. This is why I keep saying squad, because going back to earlier, as much as, if people were to be the villains, Saliba, Gabriel, Raya, Kiwior, and maybe a couple of others flattered to deceive, but 9 times out of 10, they've been the guys that save us. And, there's different heroes and villains every game. A true mark of a team is actually how you carry your teammates through it. And that is, I know I'm frustrated about the game, but the one thing I would give us is there is those building blocks of resilience. And that is something we need to harness. It's just, I think it's a bit of everything. I think it's a bit of naivety. I think it's a bit of teething problems. I think it's, I won't say an inability to manage our emotions, but we did look psychologically shocked. And that just shows you football's a funny old game, because in theory, the things that you and me are saying about us defensively, we really shouldn't be saying that at the Emirates, because it's only Arsenal fans. They played in the stadium. We're in form. Bayern's form is on the floor. There should be every reason for us not to see that. But it just shows you football's a funny old game, and experience can be overstated, but it can't be overrated, in my opinion. And it also shows that the fine margins that you might get away with in the league might not happen in the champs, man. And that's the ladder of sorts we need to go up, man.
You know what, mate? Like, here, there's something that I want to read for everybody, because I think people would be shocked to hear it.
Go ahead.
Experience counts for quite a bit, right? But do you know that Arsenal at home in the Champions League have been the highest rated team in all of Europe, have scored the joint most goals at the Emirates, have fewest goals conceded, as well, man, have fewest XG conceded, and have had the fewest XG per shot against, which just means, for those people that aren't into stats, that essentially we have prevented the most quality shots in Europe at the Emirates and have conceded the fewest chances in Europe. Now, is that an experience?
Not for me.
So
it has to be contextualized as well, especially in the champs, because like the group stages were relatively easy service. But that just shows you, like, that's what I say, the experience can be overrated, but it can't be overstated. But at the same time, I think people fail to understand experience. There's many different ways you can get experience. You could say Odegaard is inexperienced, really, but obviously he's experienced. As you mentioned earlier, he's been there since 16. I have Declan Rice as one of those, because although he ain't played in the champs, much less at this stage until this year, he's won a conference. Exactly, he's played in Europe, so there's transferable experience. And a lot of these players, I know there's nothing that can replicate the Champions League, but you've all, either through your upbringing, the leagues you've come up in, or in the Europa League, you've all played in hostile environments. Not that you can control that to the Emirates. So, yeah, how far does it go? And to go with your stats, like, there's something there. And again, bro, like, that's something that annoyed me a lot more. I know early days in the Champions League, we were just running away with it, but that just reflects how good we are defensively. So to let those goals go in, and we're not sitting here and saying, my word, Sane danced past 20 players, this guy shot from 30 yards. That's what I find difficult to swallow, bro.
But that's what I would call football heritage. Like, I believe, like, personally, like, the goals that we conceded, again, I said it at the top of the show, Burnley would be pissed to score those goals. Right. And
yeah, Burnley of old, maybe not so much under company, but you're right.
Exactly. And so I think, like, in general, what you can say is there was a naivety that we had, for sure.
Facts.
And you can, and also I'm not sitting there dismissing the experience, because, again, I want to repeat what we said at the beginning of the show, where a lot of people that we felt, like Saliba, for example, who doesn't have a lot of experience in Europe, is making uncharacteristic errors, not just, at Bayern, but I think even at Porto, he looked a little bit in composure. So there's definitely a level of experience playing a factor. It's just, I feel that people go too hard into that, especially when you're discussing the context of the game, because when Arsenal stepped on the gas pedal, they made Bayern look worried. And that was not because they were inexperienced, mate. And that's the
annoying thing. That's the annoying thing, because, like, it was a game of, as I said, for me, I think we started well. I think we ended relatively well. I think in between is where the lines start getting a bit blurred. I feel throughout the whole game, there was moments of nerves and moments of optimism. The only time I'd say I saw consistency, whether we were scoring or creating chances, would have obviously been in the final third. And ultimately, it's a game of fine margins. Bayern could have had a penalty. We definitely should have had one. Ben White's hit, not scored, and Arteta himself has said that's the moment, really, to be fair to Benjamin White. I don't think Arteta's putting the blame with him. The man's not paid to score goals per se. And as a Sunday League fullback, I could tell you 100% when you get into those positions, you do get nosebleeds, you do get excited. You might never be there again. So
you're just trying to get in on target, aren't you, mate? Like,
exactly. You're probably thinking too much. But for me, the only thing I'd say with Benjamin White, whether you're a striker or whatever, well, you put it straight at the keeper, in it. I know, if you're in that situation, you might have seen something differently, and the picture you see might be different. But Ben, you've got that in your locker, man. I've seen you do skills. You've definitely got the ability to put that
finish a couple of weeks ago.
Exactly. He's definitely, and even last season, what was it, against Bournemouth, I believe, when we was coming back from behind, scored a terrific finish. But it's just one of those things. He had one chance and he didn't score. Many players, if they only had one chance, they might not have bagged. We're saying this about Benjamin White today. Against City, it was more the attacking players and it was a great defensive performance. So it goes back into saying we're just a team. I can't have you here and not speak about Saka. Now, for me, it's a penalty. Whether people say he was looking for it, I don't care, because if he does that outside the area, it's seen as smart play. Jogba made a career of this. Jogba's a brute. He could fight everybody in the world. He could probably fight a gorilla. He went down like a little baby half the time when in the box. I think it's a pen. What's your thoughts?
I think it's a pen. I don't know why people say that it's not a pen. I think it's, if I'm being rude, I don't want to say it. It's an R word, and I think it's racist. I'm sorry. You look at
what you feel, man. Say what you feel, my guy. This is the channel. Say exactly what you feel, my dude.
Mate, I don't. Look, here, the one thing I will say, I think Saka initiates the contact, and he's looking to initiate the contact, as does every forward as every forward in world football. But one thing that is also true is Neuer moves to him. Neuer moves to block him, to make a tackle. He misses, okay, and he blocks, and he absolutely impedes him. And at full speed, I'm telling you right now, you're not stopping, and you're being tripped, and it's without the ball. So it's without a doubt a penalty. I don't know why we have to say, okay, because Saka initiates the contact, it means it absolves Neuer of doing that. And it's just the discourse has been incredibly weird, because I look at the Harvey Elliott penalty, and I'm saying, like, people aren't.
Do you not remember Jota's a few months ago against who it was? Fair enough. It's ridiculous, bro.
Yeah, and but fundamentally for me, again, it's Neuer moving. It doesn't absolve. Like, why is no one talking about Neuer takes a move? It's not planted. Bukayo doesn't run into him. Neuer makes a move. He mistimes it, and he hits the leg. And I've never seen that not given. So it's just, I find it ridiculous ultimately. And, I think Bukayo Saka is the last person in world football to buy fouls. And you're actually being intellectually dishonest if you're sitting there saying he doesn't ride contact, and he hasn't done that all throughout his career. So I think it's ridiculous. And, he is somebody that, I think is the most honest player in the world.
You can see how angry he was with the ref after the game. I can't lie to you, though. Do you think he could have stayed on his feet? Obviously, it's very difficult. I don't think he could have, but I also feel maybe, just maybe, he could have. That weren't my initial reaction, though.
I mean, I depends on your definition. Can he stay on his feet, falling over and not getting a shot off?
Could he go around? Could he have gone around the keeper and could he have put the ball in the back of the net? Let's say that.
No, I don't. I think he falls and he tries to stay up. And I think ultimately, De Ligt meets the challenge there because he's off balance. And, I think he gets a shot off, but it's deflected and it's not a good shot. And I don't think that, I think to expect him to shift, he's already pivoted, mate. Like, look at some of the stills. He's looking at the ball when he's past Neuer. I don't think people understand the speed that you have to change direction with to do what people are asking him to do. They're watching it in slow-mo and actually trying to think, that's the reality of real life when it's just, it's not the case. So, I mean, look, the biggest thing that I can say is I think that it was a penalty. I can understand why people think it isn't a penalty, but I will always respond with this. If Saka initiates contact, which is everybody's right, by the way, why are people absolving Neuer of his move to block Saka? Look, if Neuer is sitting there planted and Saka does that, I can understand the shouts more. But, mate, you can see his right leg move to go and stop Saka. He makes a motion to tackle him, and he misses.
If he wins a foul outside the area, they say it's a smart one to win. We say it about City players all the time. And for me, I don't nudge that. You know, you've got to be street smart in life. Kane buys fouls. Kane was buying fouls all yesterday, really and truly. We've seen Kane buy penalties, you know, and I like the fact that Saka, even if he did try to buy it and he was taking a tumble, as much as I don't advocate cheating or dark arts, not accusing Saka, unfortunately, you need to do that in the game because we've seen it, like that comment says here, sometimes footballers are too honest and the refs are not going to save you. And also, I have to ask you, what was your thoughts on the Gabriel handball? Because we'd be being dishonest if we completely acted like Bayern Munich didn't have a shout. Upon looking at it again, I think we may have been fortunate there. I think there was a number of decisions that maybe Saka's penalty, definitely given Davies, who I know suspended a second yellow. I think there were some big calls the referee ducked out of, if I'm honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's 100% a handball. You can't go away from it. But the one thing I will say is that there is a little bit of common sense that I'm glad the referee did because it's a schoolboy error. And it's not as though something that, you know, Bayern are on the attack for. And I mean, it would have been I've never seen that given. I've seen stuff like that so many times. So I thought it was a schoolboy error in a sense, but it was a handball. Like, if you want to ask me consistently, like by the letter of the law, does it deserve a penalty? Yeah, 100%. Have I ever seen that given in a Champions League quarterfinal? It would be crazy. It would have been incredibly harsh to give. That's like on the level. I think Sané had a better shout for potential penalties, let's say, in the box with other chances than that. I think the handball would have been really harsh. But I mean, yeah, so by the letter of logic, both people didn't get a penalty. You know, in the end, if you really want to talk about who's more to blame and whatnot. But yeah, I'm more upset again, personally. I'm glad we had the discourse, but I'm more upset about what we did in midfield, what Arsenal did to lose that game more than the officiating. I will maintain that point.
This is what I'm saying. I feel, you know, we've, you know, even if you played Sunday League, you're taught control what you can control. Yes, refs can change the outcome of a game, but control what you can control, and you 9 times out of 10 get a positive outcome. Do I feel we defended our best? Controllables. Do I feel we defended our best? Did I feel Arteta would say, honestly, if he feels that he couldn't have done anything differently in hindsight? Do I feel, as much as I feel we was better in the final third, do I think we created consistently, like what you said with Martinelli? I can't say we did. So these are things that we could have controlled. Yeah. Even if people look at the Saka pen or the Benjamin White miss, or, you know, these incidences defensively across 90 minutes, you know, these are flashpoints. Where is the rest? So I do want to focus on that. I do think we should have had a pen, but at the end of the day, it is what it is. So with that being said, and I know we've got to go to, you know, well, we've got to welcome Aston Villa to the Emirates, so we can't really look too far ahead. With everything we've discussed, how's your thoughts going into the game in Germany then?
There's a part of me that says, well, if you just performed like you haven't done all season, then there's only up to go from there. You know, like I look at our defensive performance and I'm just like, can it get worse? I don't think it can. You know, I just think if Arsenal play to their ability and they play to what's made them successful this season, there's no way that we don't walk out of that fixture with a win. And I
think it's a different game as well.
Very different game. No Alphonso Davies, no Gnabry, now out with a hamstring injury. Their entire left-hand side's gutted. We have to take advantage of that. Not only did we get joy down the left-hand side with their top plan A players, but now we absolutely need to attack that side quick and early in the return leg. I just want I want us to return to second ball dominance. I don't know why that's a weird thing to ask for. You know,
I don't think it is, because it goes back to being competitive. Like, and definitely as Arsenal fans during the Emirates era, we've been starved of that, and now we've been introduced by that with Mikel Arteta. So I don't think it's weird you saying that. I think it's personally very rational, especially away from home, 100%. Where they're going to have their fans.
And look here, the one thing I will say is I agree with this comment. I think that Jesus does need to start personally, and it's not a slight on Martinelli and his performance. I think I'd like experience here, and not even just experience. He's in form, mate. Like, he just changed the game. What does it say about the team if you're not going to be able to reward that performance, right? Like, he's found it difficult to get in. He's got the most experience in the competition in the squad, mate. He's got the best goal and assist ratio in the Champions League per 90 amongst the competition in general. He's got
That's where he's been saving his best as well for the champs, man. He turns into R9 in this competition, man.
He has been phenomenal in Europe, and it suits him, by the way. It suits him. Europe, in the European way, it suits that type of game for him. So I do want him to start. I want Tomiyasu. I don't want Kiwior there. Like, I want us to start to match up. And yeah, you know, I think in the middle of the park, I'm not sure if I'm loving the Jorginho at anchor. Like, I would like Thomas Partey, who, by the way, I don't think, if I'm being really fair, was any type of good. But the only reason that
To
I
be fair, he
suggest
did play that pass that led to Saka doing something, I remember correctly. But
he
his
did,
fitness
and there
on the
was
floor, bro. Like, I must admit, I feel like you in the sense of, as much as I clamor on with Partey, I think that's one where if I was inside the coaching staff with Arteta, I might understand why you're kind of taking it steady with not playing him, because he looks a bit rusty. I do like the fact that, you know, do you know what I actually liked about Partey and all the subs? For Partey, on top of the obvious, he took the yellow card. Like, there was times I was thinking, well, the transition's a bit mad. The only one I'll give kind of luxury to it's probably Kai Havertz and more so Declan Rice, because I did think Declan Rice was playing with a handbrake. I do think he had in mind that, boy, if I get a yellow card, we're in trouble. So I think,
which is good because he can get one. He can get one at the Allianz and be fine, because they redo the yellow cards at the semifinal. So
yeah, so take one at the Allianz, man.
Yeah, and so look, if we do have to play Jorginho from a fitness perspective, we can't rely on the Partey dynamic, then please do the Liverpool thing that we've been talking about all stream. Why is Declan Rice ahead of the ball? Please make Jorginho ahead of the ball, and just and orient ourselves that way. It's a lot better. And I'd hope to see that, you know, and I think in general, I'd hope for us to maybe let Bayern Munich come to us. You know, at the end of the day, their crowd,
the pressure and then hit them, man.
Mate, their season, you can't escape their season. And I think, ironically, their crowd is not going to be as nervous as the Emirates were, personally. We're nervous in a different sense. We're nervous because we want this team to get the plaudits. They're nervous because they've basically got dropped out of every major competition. And
this is the only joy they can get.
Yeah, and so I want us to start strong. And the one thing I will ask, by the way, is I do want us to press, mate. Like, I want us to really meet this team, put them under pressure.
We're pressing Dyer and we stopped. Like, there was a lot of joy with Dyer. If he's there, I want him to, from a footballing sense, I want him to die out there, if I'm honest with you. I think they had a great game, but I want Dyer to die out there, because anytime we was pressing, he looked like the one that, you know what, when in doubt, I'm going long. Ironically, kind of what I wanted to see Gabriel do for the goal. He's just going long. That was where it was happening for us, man.
Yeah,
but you're right.
I don't understand why we don't do that. Like, take the game to them, and I think you can get them nervous. Look, for me, score an early goal and get the game plan of the Etihad out. Sit there and go in on the counter. And I think when that goes, take Jesus off, get Martinelli on. Boom. That's how, if I was coaching this team, I would say, in the first 20 to 25 minutes, I want you to meet them hard. I want you to press them like dogs. I want you to make sure that you get an early goal, get the pressure. When you get the goal,
balls as well.
Sit in, suck in, defend in numbers, defend with your low block that you know how to do, and then we'll attack on the counter. And that's what I think that we should do personally. But yeah, I think everybody will have their different opinions on how to approach that match. I just think that you need to put that crowd under pressure immediately, that Bayern team under pressure immediately, because the longer it remains 0-0 for me, and I said this last time, the more confidence Bayern will get.
Exactly. And the more their fans will start to get onto them. And I'm looking ahead. I don't care how we win, just win. I hope it's not like the Porto game with extra time, purely because of the obvious and because you know more, you know as much as me. The games are coming thick and fast. Suddenly, if you have to play 180 minutes and then you've got a game at the weekend, boy, a squad that, yes, we're getting everyone fit, but everybody's fitness levels are very different. Some people haven't necessarily got 90 minutes. Some people, in what Wenger said, the red zone. Some people got 60. Some people got 45. Make it easier for ourselves, man. If we take the attacking performance to some degree yesterday and we get back to what we traditionally have done in terms of, like you said, winning the duels, being spot on defensively, we've got half a chance, man, and it'll be lit. The one thing I would say, though, which is a bit of a lazy thing, just on the game in general, is at least we were quote unquote competitive. We did dominate the statistics. So it does show me there is something. I know it's not the Bayern Munich that is the Bayern Munich of old, but that's nothing to do with us. My last question before I let you get out of here. Yeah. Obviously, I don't know the credibility of this, but we've been linked with Rafael Leao. Would you be open to taking him at the Emirates? Do you think he would offer something? Do you think he's underrated or overrated? Like, what's all your thoughts, Rafael Leao, man?
I think it goes in roundabouts. I'll be really honest with you. I mean, I think
Same.
Rafael Leao for me is a misunderstood genius in a sense. In terms of a footballing, I really struggle with Leao because I don't see how his philosophy works in this Arsenal team out of possession. And
I don't think he works hard enough, and I think he's quite wasteful.
Well, that's the thing.
Great pace, though. Great on the transition, but not for me.
But I'm gonna caveat this with a but. If there was one coach in world football that could fix Rafael Leao, it's Mikel Arteta. And what you do
That's
with
true.
wingers, and I just think him rotating with Gabriel Martinelli in terms of, yeah, that interchange would be deadly. And I just think in terms of an outlet, I think that there's very few others that are as potent as an outlet. But the
I think he's
problem with
just too
Leao,
old, man.
he's, you know what it is, mate. He's a maverick, and he's a genius in a sense that he plays the game to his own pace, and he can decide a match on his own, but he doesn't decide matches enough. And he decides when to turn it on.
Exactly.
And I don't like that mentality.
And the fee as well. I don't want to hear this over someone for this sort of fee. I like the guy, and when people misunderstand me, like if you're asking me as a football fan, do I like Rafael? I think he could be great on the transitions. I think he's quote unquote skillful. I think there's been times he showed greater consistency and other times he hasn't. I think there's a lot to like about him. But then when I look at it as an Arsenal fan, like you're saying, the one luxury I'll give him, if any manager can make it happen, is Mikel Arteta. But then I say to myself, as great as Arteta is, as much as he can do that, managers have made mistakes. Managers sang duds. Managers don't always get it down. And at some point, we're going to say this around Mikel Arteta, and it's not going to quite work out. And I just feel when you look at, I don't think we're going to get him for what it's worth, but when you start looking at the price tag, 175 million euros release clause, which could be negotiated down, but AC Milan, who don't have the money that the English clubs have, surely you're looking at 70 to 100 million. Is he a massive improvement on what we have? I don't think he's a bad player, but this is what I'm asking myself, George. I don't know. Or could it make sense to get Nico Williams, who's a different kind of guy, costs a lot less, a lot more impressionable, and there's a lot more upside, even if it doesn't work out? I'm not sure, man.
You know how much I've talked about Nico Williams, even
That's
on the
why I
last
mentioned
stream.
him, because the comment.
That's my guy. I think. Look, mate, the real tough thing with Leao is I think he's got. If you're talking about talent, Leao has the ability to potentially win the Ballon d'Or for me.
There you have it.
But can you? But that's a problem when you're talking about 120 million pounds, even 110 million pounds, even. Can you spend on that statement? He has the potential to, at 24 years of age and for 100 million pounds. You
Everyone's
can't
got
do
potential,
that.
man.
You need to be sure. Like when I'm looking at Declan Rice and I'm looking at that fee, 100 million pounds, what does that tell me? You are one of the best players in the world.
He's going to do the thing. Yeah.
He's going to do it. And I have questions, but I also do think he's got the talent too, mate. He 100% does. I just don't like players that I have to turn the switch on for. I've never liked that. Like
there you have it.
So for me, I just don't think he works in that sense. So that's why I'm kind of looking a little bit elsewhere. But I will say, let's say Arsenal pursue Leao. I'm telling you right now, as a front line, I would be excited. And I would say, is Mikel the one to turn a switch? If he does, we have a serious front line. But I don't like that gamble. It's a gamble, and it's something that I can't answer. Because
that's the most humblest thing. We can't answer it, bro.
It's mentality though, mate. Like I always look here. I'll put it to you really simply instead of speaking around the bush. If I've got a player, there's either physical, there's either technical, or there's mental questions. Those are the three caveats that I think you do as a scout, right? Physically, is there a question with Leao? No, he's an animal. I think physically he can do whatever he wants. Repeat sprinter. He's 6'2". He's a frightening pace. He can change the gears like no one else. Frightening player. Technically, inconsistent, but on his day, he can do whatever he wants with the ball. And actually, he knows it. He actually knows how good he is. And so he tries less. And sometimes he turns on genius and whatnot.
And we can't have even one guy in the starting 11 doing that. That's why, for me, what I just said, I think he's hot and cold. Like, great, you're great technically. And again, if we sign him, I'll be screaming from the rooftops. But I think you have to find that instinct. I mean, that balance. But I think he plays too much on instinct. He's not calculated enough. And I think even the players that do play on instinct at this club, Arteta is making them be a bit more calculated, whether it's your body positioning, whether it's areas you take up, whether it's seeing the pass before the passes happen. I don't think Leao's got that. And I know a lot of people say he could be converted into a striker. I guess he could, but the hold-up play isn't quite there for me.
And I was just going to end, the mentality is the biggest question. The idea that you decide when to turn on your talent is not something that I'm comfortable with, because Mikel Arteta demands that you're engaged in duels 100% of the time, and that's just not Leao. And that's too much of a gamble, where only Leao can answer that, by the way. And only
Exactly,
Mikel
it's
can
crazy.
answer that. So it's not something. So when I see that, that's when I struggle. So yeah, mate, like I would probably rather look towards more of a guarantee that I think buys into the mentality of the squad a little bit more. And I think Nico Williams does that again for 42 million pounds, you know? So I think he does that both sides, by the way. He does it in terms of having an ambipedal threat. He's brilliant in terms of pace. He has the same brilliance in ball striking. He's just raw and he's very, very young, but I think he's the next best thing. For me, Nico Williams is the next best winger prospect on the market. He's not complete, but for me, he's the next best winger that's coming up.
And I'd rather do something like that. Don't get twisted again. You know, if Arteta said I want Leao over Williams, I'm with that. But if we're going to spend that crazy money, it has to be people like Declan Rice, if not necessarily like beyond the obvious. You're better than what we have. There's a lot of questions that are answered. Like Declan Rice came into this football club with a certain level of a foundation at West Ham, playing in that 6, and Arteta is just fine tuning. Leao is a bit different. I do like him. I do think, you know, considering he's lived in multiple countries, he did praise Arsenal as well a few years ago. So if that's something we want to do, want it to happen, I don't buy the rumors beyond the obvious because it seems like the vast majority of it is based on his future. Will he sign a new deal? Won't he? I just think the Williams thing makes more sense. It means we've got resources that can go elsewhere. He's younger than Leao, so there's certain things that you can add to his game before he's picked up bad habits. Not saying Leao has that. And for me, it's the work rate. I do think Leao works hard, but like you said, he kind of turns it on and off. So we'll have to see, man. George, it's always amazing being here with you, man. Speaking from, you know, about the Arsenal game to Leao and all the other isms and schisms we got onto. It's a pleasure to have a fellow footballing mind, man. Let people know where they can find you. I did put your Twitter page in the chat and big up you lot who are followed. But yeah, man.
Thanks, man. No, it's brilliant always to come on the channel, and you know,
come
you're
on,
good people.
You're welcome all the time.
I love it, mate. I love it, and thank you to everyone in the comments. Hope you guys enjoyed it. You can find me at GeorgeV_AFC on Twitter or at the Cannon Podcast, both on YouTube and on X as well.
So you know where to find him. Cannon Podcast. His Twitter has just been said it's been dropped. Go and spam his profiles. Tell him you don't need to get onto him and ask him why he doesn't have his own YouTube channel. People, I expect to see that very soon. So make sure you go and bully him on social media into making that, because he's a great, fantastical footballing mind. There's a lot of idiots on social media, so I don't know why smart people don't make their channels. But it is what it is, man. George, obviously, man, go enjoy. What's the time zone over there? It's morning time for you, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, it's like 11:30. Yeah.
Yeah, man, go enjoy your day, man. Appreciate you for being here, man, and we'll kick it again soon, man. I'll let you know when we can do this again. In fact, you let me know, because I know you're a busy guy, and we'll go again, man. But one love for being here, bro.
Thank you.
So come on, man. So yeah, people, comment, like, subscribe, let us know your thoughts. I'm sure you lot agree, disagree. I'm sure a lot of you don't agree with me and George in the sense of the Saka pen shout. So let us know. But for now, we're out, man. Peace.
There's always like